substantial evidence that what DeepSeek did here is they distilled the knowledge out of OpenAI's models. And I don't think OpenAI is very happy about this.
OpenAI claims to have evidence that the Chinese company DeepSeek used OpenAI's model outputs to train its own competing model. This allegation is significant, as DeepSeek's price-performance ratio has already impacted the stock market. This news could lead to OpenAI suing DeepSeek for alleged intellectual property theft. One key piece of evidence circulating online right now is this screenshot. People have noticed that when you ask DeepSeek, "Who are you?" during random conversations, it often refers to itself as a large language model developed by OpenAI. This happens because if a model is trained on OpenAI's outputs, it naturally picks up responses that include phrases like, "as an AI developed by OpenAI, XYZ." That's exactly what we're seeing in DeepSeek's responses. This is significant because if DeepSeek were an entirely original model that hadn't been trained on OpenAI's data, it should instead state, "I am a model developed by DeepSeek." However, in many cases, it actually identifies itself as an OpenAI-developed model, which raises concerns, especially given the current discussions around AI training practices. It's worth noting that DeepSeek has recently updated this behavior. Now, if you ask, "Who developed you?" it responds with, "I was developed by DeepSeek." But earlier, it used to say, "I am a large language model developed by OpenAI." This strongly suggests that DeepSeek was, at least in part, trained on OpenAI's outputs. OpenAI has stated that they discovered additional evidence indicating that the Chinese AI startup, DeepSeek, may have used proprietary models from a US company to train its own open-source competitor. This has raised concerns about a possible breach of intellectual property. OpenAI is essentially alleging that they have identified signs of model distillation. In machine learning, the goal is often to transfer the capabilities of a large model into a smaller, more efficient one. The process begins with a large model trained on a vast dataset, allowing it to capture complex patterns and knowledge. Then, a smaller student model is initialized, designed to be more resource efficient. The student model learns by training on the outputs of the larger teacher model. This involves refining the student model so it can closely mimic the teacher's output distribution, capturing the nuanced insights the teacher has acquired. In this context, OpenAI has applied this approach using models like S1 or similar architectures. In fact, OpenAI has previously distilled highly advanced models, including an internal model reportedly known as GPT-5. I'm not exactly sure what the model is called, maybe Orion, but essentially, they've been refining its capabilities and integrating them into models like GPT-4. This allows them to provide these advanced features at a much lower cost. Take a look at what Grok CEO Jonathan Ross has to say about distillation and how DeepSeek was able to quickly enhance its AI capabilities with insights from OpenAI, along with an explanation of how this process works.
If there's a really good model already right here, just have it generate the data, and you go whoop right up to where it is. And that's what they did. So it is true that they spent about 6 million or whatever it was on the training. They spent a lot more distilling or scraping the OpenAI model. OpenAI was effectively subsidizing, accidentally, the training of this model because they were using OpenAI, right? And you know, rumors are that OpenAI may not be completely profitable yet in terms of every token in the API. Like on the subscriptions, maybe, but in the API. And so each one that they generate, effectively, they were losing a little bit of money while DeepSeek was getting training data.
He mentions that DeepSeek is using training data for their model, which is pretty wild when you think about it. Overall, it seems like DeepSeek might be taking data from OPI. The article goes on to explain how developers use this technique to achieve better performance on smaller models. By leveraging the outputs from larger, more capable models, they can achieve similar results on specific tasks at a much lower cost. Distillation is a common practice within the industry. However, the concern arose that DeepSeek might be using this method to create their own competing product, which would violate OpenAI's terms of service. We'll dive into that in just a moment. The interesting thing here is that OpenAI doesn't actually want to share the specifics of its evidence in its terms of service. They mention that you can't use copies of their content to compete with OpenAI, but that's not the main point I want to focus on. The real issue is that OpenAI hasn't provided detailed information, which I think is significant. If they did, DeepSeek could potentially cover its tracks. For example, I mentioned earlier that sometimes DeepSeek referred to itself as OpenAI, but now they've removed that. Now, whenever it refers to itself, it says, "I'm DeepSeek." That's an important piece of evidence because if their model were solely trained by themselves, it wouldn't say, "I'm a large language model by OpenAI." Of course, they will likely argue that their model was trained on a vast portion of the internet, which includes text that may contain OpenAI's model. So they won't exactly be cornered with no defenses. Take a look at what David Sachs, the ICER, has to say. He's the government-appointed leader in charge of overseeing and managing AI policies, regulations, and strategies. In a recent interview, he mentioned that it's quite possible this is exactly what DeepSeek did to unlock the capabilities of the current model.
Well, it's possible. There's a technique in AI called distillation, which you're going to hear a lot about, and it's when one model learns from another model. Effectively, what happens is that the student model asks the parent model a lot of questions, just like a human would learn. But AIs can do this, asking millions of questions, and they can essentially mimic the reasoning process that they learn from the parent model, and they can kind of suck the knowledge out of the parent model. And there's substantial evidence that what DeepSeek did here is they distilled the knowledge out of OpenAI's models. And I don't think OpenAI is very happy about this. And I think one of the things you're going to see over the next few months is our leading AI companies taking steps to try and prevent distillation. And so we'll see if the leading AI companies can prevent distillation by third-party companies. That would definitely slow down some of these copycat models.
When you take a look at the terms of service, it's clear that one of the key restrictions is that you cannot use their outputs to create models that directly compete with OpenAI. In this case, DeepSeek is a direct competitor. So if they were to do this, it could open the door for OpenAI to potentially pursue legal action on several different grounds. They've also mentioned here that you're prohibited from attempting to assist anyone in reverse engineering, decompiling, or uncovering the source code, or any underlying components of their services, including their models, algorithms, or systems. This is clearly a violation of their terms of service. I wouldn't be surprised if OpenAI decides to take legal action against DeepSeek based on these grounds. The article goes on to mention that it's a common practice for startups and academics to use outputs from human-aligned commercial language models like ChatGPT to train their own models. This insight comes from someone with a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. Essentially, they highlight that you benefit from all the human feedback at step 3 of the process. It's not surprising that companies like DeepMind may also be using similar techniques, though stopping this practice might prove challenging. It's tough to determine when someone is simply chatting with a model versus using it to generate specific outputs for building their own models. This would be a real challenge to pinpoint. Moreover, OpenAI can't just implement strict rate limits because that would make the platform practically useless for developers. So, they're in a bit of a bind, trying to figure out how to monitor this effectively. If you enjoy this video, don't forget like and subscribe this channel for more updates. See you in next part.